uh, 4 or 5 minutes late, some technical issues on our end in terms of internet. All right, so let's get started. So with these Burke Cashflow Investor meetings, we try to answer some live questions. And today I have a few of them in front of me. So we're going to get started. If you have any friends, family, other people that are interested in learning about real estate, let us have them join the group, so that we can basically keep expanding the group. That's how we get to grow. So today there are a few different questions, and we'll start with number one. So the number one question that we're going to start with today is about a 1031 exchange. So this person's basically asking, well, I have a property that I bought, and I bought that 8 months ago, and I'm going to be selling the property. And now that I'm closing the property, can I do a 1031 exchange? So basically, they purchased this particular property for $96,000. They put about $85,000 into that particular property. So their basis in the property is going to be 96, so plus another 85 or so. So let's just say basically 180, so $180,000 ballpark. And now this person wants to do a 1031 because he's selling the property for 310. Number one, congratulations on your deal, because this is a great, obviously, property. And this happens to be somebody from Mastery. So fantastic job on your flip. Now, I am not sure who told you you could do a 1031 exchange on it. So 1031 exchange, you cannot do on this property. Not legally, at least, as far as the IRS rules are concerned, because number one, you did not hold this property as a rental property. You bought the property as a flip property, and then you basically are selling it in about 8 months or so as a flip, and you're closing it. This person had another question, and they're like, well, it's going to be a bunch of taxes that I'm going to have to pay. And that's true. Now, if you had rehabbed the property, if you've kept it as a flip property, as a rental property for a year or two, and then you flip it, then you can do a 1031 exchange. So that basically, in this particular case, at least legally, I don't know of any way that you can do a 1031 exchange. You are more than welcome to check with your accountant, but I'm almost 99.9% sure that in this case, you cannot do a 1031 exchange. The second question that was there was also related to a 1031 exchange. And we kind of put couple of these together because they will kind of go together. So what is a 1031, and when does somebody do a 1031 exchange? So a 1031, it's called a 1031 stalker exchange. And basically what that says is this, that if you buy a property and if you hold the property for a period of time, more than a year, at that point, instead of selling the property and taking all the gains. So what happens when you sell a property, right? Let's say, to just make it very simplistic, you bought the property for 150, you're selling the property for 250. Right. So if you have 20,000 other expenses, so then you have an $80,000 gain, and then you may have to recapture your depreciation. So even though you're selling the property now, in a year, you're not going to have to capture that much depreciation, but otherwise it would be a lot of depreciation you may have to capture. So you may basically, let's say you held the property for 10, 15 years, 20 years, right? And you've depreciated the property throughout that process of time. And now you have a gain, you have a $200,000 gain. Plus, you have to recapture the depreciation that you have already done, that you've already taken. So now you're not just paying taxes on 200,000 gain. Now you'll be paying taxes actually on that 200,000. Plus, you have to recapture the depreciation that you got as per IRS rules. So you're actually paying taxes on more money. Now you got the advantage of it, and they say, hey, now you're selling the property, now give it back to us, right? This is just how the IRS works. So a lot of times what a lot of people will do is they say, well, I'm selling the property and I'm not going to basically take this money and go buy a car with it. I'm not going to go just play with this money. I'm going to reinvest it. Let's just say hypothetically, you're going to reinvest the money. You're selling a property in Illinois, you're reinvesting the money in Florida. Well, if you're going to reinvest the money, then at that point, what you can do is instead of selling the property and then at the time of sale, a check being cut to you or a wire being more likely today, obviously it's a wire being sent to you, instead of that, before you go to the closing, and you should do this at least 2 weeks, ideally about 3 weeks before the closing to a month, you set up what is called a 1031. So if you're working Fidelity, they have a sister company that's all they do. They just do 1031 exchanges. So you're going to go to them and say, hey, I'm going to be doing a 1031. Now, what they're going to do is they're going to basically set it up so that at the time of closing, they're going to take that money, park it in a trust account for you. It's your money still, but they're going to park it. You're not going to touch it. In the meantime, you're going to have to go identify a property or 2 or 3 that you're going to buy. So you have to basically buy a property of equal to and or greater value. And it doesn't have to be just one property. You can buy 3, 4, 5 properties of equal to and or greater value, right? So what that means is that let's say I'm selling a property and I have a gain. I have 4 properties I'm selling and I have a gain of close to $600,000. And this is where these rules are important. Don't try to interpret them. Don't just say, well, I think this is how it is, or this is what the internet says. You need to follow them by the book. They're meant for you to be able to make a lot of money. And this is why generally you'll see wealthy people, a lot of wealthy people will use these exchanges and they keep deferring. This is not that you're not paying the taxes. There's a difference, right? It's not that you're not paying the taxes. You're saying, hey, I will pay the taxes later. So why do people do this? So I'll give you guys an example. Like I'm selling a few properties, and on this, on one of the properties, right, my sales price is going to end up being close to about 600,000. And I'm going to have about $400,000 gain in this particular property. Now, I have a bunch of these. I have 21 of these particular types of units, but I'm just talking about one just to make it simple, right? Now, what happens is this. I've owned the property for a long time. I've depreciated the heck out of it. So I'm going to get hit, and I'm going to get hit hard, right? Now, what am somebody like me going to do? I'm not going to take that money and go buy a car with it or go play with it. I'm going to reinvest that money. So if I'm going to reinvest it anyways, then what happens is this, that I'm going to use a 1031. So I have identified already some properties that I'm going to buy that is equal to and or greater than, and it doesn't have to be one property. So if I sell one property, I can buy 2, 3, 4, 5 properties. I don't have to necessarily only buy one. Right? So it's important to understand. Now, there are some rules that are kind of technical on that, because you say, well, but my gain in the property was only 200,000, right? So there are some rules at that you have to follow. And this particular company that Fidelity works with, they'll be happy because that's all they do. They will be happy to explain to you what the rules are. But think about what the advantage is. In this case, if I have somewhere around $400,000 in profit, right, that profit, I can basically reinvest that entire amount of money rather than pay taxes. If I paid taxes on it, almost $100,000, if not $120,000, I'm going to lose. Right now. So instead of that, I'm going to reinvest the whole thing. And the IRS says, okay, you can pay us later. Now, let's say it's 10 years from now when I sell those sets of properties. Now that gain, right? Now let's just say that $500,000 has become $2 million, right? Now that gain, I can again basically defer it to the next time, and you can basically keep as long as you follow the 1031 exchange rules, and you do it within the time frame that it lays out. It's 45 days to identify and 6 months to close. So you can't say, well, I parked the money here and now I'm going to take my sweet time closing. That's not how it works, right? It has to be done within the specified time by the IRS. So as long as you follow the rules and do that within that time, they will let you reinvest it. And a lot of times, if this is done correctly, literally, I could be 100 years old and I could be dead. And this money I have reinvested, and then I could pass it down to my next of kin, right? To my niece and nephew, right? To whoever I want to at that point, and they would inherit those properties at the new basis, right? Their basis would reset to whatever the values are at that time. And all this time, what I was doing was not paying taxes. I was deferring the tax, right? If you say to the IRS, hey, I'm not going to pay taxes, they don't like that. But if you say, hey, I'm going to defer the tax as per 1031, that is something that the code allows. This is something, if you've paid any attention to politics last few years, this has been a big issue for the Democrats. Right? I don't think they're ever going to pass it because most of their wealthy donors, they want the 1031s. They don't want to pay those taxes, right? Why would I? It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat. Why the hell would you want to pay those taxes? Only people who don't like this are people who are poor people, and they're like, well, screw the rich people. Why would I? Why would I care that if the rich people have to pay taxes? So if you're that person, I feel sorry for you, because then you never plan on basically using real estate to build wealth. So it doesn't really matter, but that's okay. So the next question was an interesting question. So hopefully 1031 is a fantastic subject, right? Why? Because so many people who really understand how to use the tax code to really, and a lot of times people think they're doing something sneaky. There's no reason to do something sneaky. A tax code is written for you to build a bigger business. That's what it's written for. It's not for you to cheat the system. It's written so that you reinvest. Why do they give you a break? They give you a break because you're reinvesting in more properties. What that means is, from the IRS perspective, you're reinvesting in the economy. Hence, they give you a break. They're not doing you any kind of a favor. They're just saying, hey, if you're reinvesting in the economy, that's where we're going to give you a break. No different than an insurance product, some of the other types of products that are available that get IRS breaks. It's the same exact thing here. It just happens to be with real estate. So just something that I wanted to talk about, because this is such a important topic right now. Now, the next question was, before I buy a property, when do you learn about a village non-conformity, citations, code violations, tax situations, and simple demolition notices? So information you provided, blah, blah. Okay. I'm just trying to understand this question. I can't understand this question, so I'm going to go to the next one. So, okay. If I bought a property on a contract for deed, if so, how do you do accounting when you rent it? Any info would be greatly appreciated. Thank you in advance. So has anyone brought a contract for deed? So if so, how do I do accounting when you rent it? So now this is kind of two questions. To me, I can tell you how do you do a P&L in that particular case, right? That's easy. But how do you do accounting in terms of when, from an IRS perspective, I think this should be a question for your accountant. So I don't want to say how you do the accounting in that particular case, and I'll let your accountant get involved in that, like meaning, can you depreciate it? Can you not depreciate it? In terms of when you're buying the property contract for deed, I would think you could, but I don't know. There would be a consequence for the seller, but I'm not sure if there's a consequence for the buyer if you are buying the property on contract for deed, because on the seller's end, it would depend when they're taking, what date do they show, because I don't think they can show the date of sale, because it's not a full sale, it's an installment sale as it's called. So that would be a question that you should have for your accountant. And as far as P&L would be easy, right? What do you have the property rented for, and then what are your payments? So, and then what are the other expenses that are written next to it? So the accounting that way in terms of P&L would be very, very simple to do. But what I don't know is how the accounting would take place in terms of the seller and in terms of buyer, as far as, because this would be an installment sale. So talk to a qualified CPA or an accountant in terms of how they would account for that from an accounting purposes, not from a P&L purposes. P&L purposes, it's really, really simple. The next question was, with the high interest rates, how do I decide whether I am going to buy a property in terms of whether I'm going to take over existing payments from the homeowner, or whether I should be originating a new loan. Right. So what is the distinction? So in this particular case, this person is buying this particular property for $196,000. And on $196,000, they have a loan at 3.5%. Right. So they'd be basically picking up a loan for 3.5% is what this is. Their current balance owed, the seller has been paying on this property for about 3 years. That's what they're saying. And now what they're wondering is, should they be basically taking over the payments from the seller? So the question is this. The first thing you have to think about, and this person says, I have $30,000 to start with. What should I do? Well, the first question I'm going to ask is, what does the seller want? Is the seller just saying, hey, I'm going to walk away from the property and you can take over my loan and that's it? Right? I mean, if that's the situation, depending on what the payments are, in this particular case, your payment should be pretty low because the taxes on this particular property should be somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000, right? It should not be more than that. So your payment should be pretty low on this particular property, and your number should be really sweet. But this person says, hey, I only have $30,000. Now, when I ask this question further, this person says, oh, the seller wants another $50,000 to walk away from the property because they say they have a lot of equity and they're giving me a lot of equity. So now the situation changes. Now the second question that follows that is, well, how much work does the property need? Well, the property needs a minimum of $40K in work, right? Now it's a different situation. If you think about it, right? You have $30K, the seller wants $50. On top of that, you need $40 to fix up the property. So basically, you need a minimum of $90,000 to get in this deal. Now, and you have to take over a existing payment at a good interest rate of 196. So how would you decide whether you should be, number one, doing this deal, and then what method you should use? Now, so when I ask this question, the first thing, if you're from Mastery, the first thing we would ask is, hey, let me find out this. What area is this property located in, right? So is it an A area, B area, C area, or D area? So that's the first logic where we start, right? So this particular property happens to be in a solid A area. So this happens to be in Willowbrook is where this property is located. And basically for Willowbrook, this property all fixed up in mint condition is going to be worth, I'm going to say somewhere around $350,000, if not $370,000. So in terms of value on this property, it is an excellent, excellent, excellent property. So you should not let go of this property at all whatsoever, period. Right? So this will be a really good property. Now the only question becomes is, hey, how do I acquire this property, or what makes sense? Now you could do it a couple of different ways. Could you take the 196 over from the seller, and could you do a subject to type of transaction? Yes, you could. And I know that's what you're trying to do here. And could you do that? Sure. But now you have a problem. You only have $30,000. You need to come up with a total of 90. So you're going to be short 60,000. So now what would be the second way of doing it? Well, the second way would be, or to do it with a subject to, you're going to have to go and get a $60,000 second from somebody else. Or if you have another property or you have equity in another property, you're going to have to basically put another loan on it and pick up the $60,000 to be able to make this deal happen. Now, that's one way of doing it. Now, this person's intention is not to keep this property. This person's intention is to flip the property, right? And so do you want to basically go, or do you have somebody that will give you the $60K to make up the difference and then do this deal? Great. So you can temporarily basically go on a subject to transaction, right? And borrow the $60,000. You already have $30,000. So you can do this deal. Right? There's no problem doing this deal, but since you're intending on flipping the property, you can flip the property 6 months in spring, and then you can basically, the seller gets paid off and the whole thing is done. Now, if you don't have, because this is where the problem this person is having is that this person says, well, I don't have anybody that I can borrow the delta from. I can't borrow the 60,000 bucks. Everybody, a bunch of people, this person knows a bunch of people from Mastery, and they have said no, they're not going to do a second lien on a property, right? And they're saying the right thing, right? If you ask me, Andrew, would you lend me as a second lien on the property, right? Generally, I would say no, I don't think so, because number one, you're not going to give me a return that is big enough for me to be satisfied, right? Cash on cash returns that I make on my properties are a lot larger. So then why am I going to give you a second lien? So what do I do? Right? If you have nobody, first you should go and find out if you can find somebody that'll give you a second lien position. If that is not possible, then second thing is, can you take on a partner and maybe sweeten the pie for them a little bit, give them a fixed interest rate, and then give them a piece of your deal on the flip? You could do that also. So that's another way of doing it, right? Or the third way of doing it, which I think would be much simpler, like with this given scenario, with the $30,000 that you have, with maybe if you have additional couple more $1,000, you could basically just do a regular hard money loan. And you can do this deal all by yourself. You won't need anybody. Yes, there's going to be an interest rate difference. Yes. And I actually calculated the interest rate difference for you between if you went hard money or if you did it the way you're thinking about it. The difference is going to be about $2,800. Right? $2,800. You don't have to have anybody else involved in the deal. And that's the worst case scenario. It's going to be about $2,800 given all the numbers that you sent me, versus you basically trying to go and do this, borrow money because you could now put a second lien and all that stuff. It'll be a lot more complex. I think it makes much more sense in this particular situation for you to call Jesse at National RE Funding. They will be happy. 10% down. You have already done a few transactions from the history that you've told me, and you're not going to have any problem getting a loan. Put 10% down, so 10% of 196 is going to be about 20,000 bucks, and you'll be able to do this deal all by yourself. And you're going to put the property back on the market and flip the property anyways. So I would not get myself into a subject to transaction in this particular case. So that's kind of what it is. The next question was, well, I've heard Andrew talk about some areas like Matson, some areas like Country Club Hills, some areas like Olympia Fields, and should I not be doing business in that area? So number one, I'm nobody to stop you from doing business in an area or not. Whenever I talk about areas, I'm talking about from an investment, from a point of what makes sense for investing, right? So if you're going to do a flip in Olympia Fields right now, because I know, so this question was tailored to that this person has a house that they found. It's going to auction, and their question to me was, should they be looking at this property? And my immediate response to them was, well, what are the taxes? They're like, oh, I didn't think about that. I'm like, well, that would be an important thing to think about, because this is a 3,000 square foot house. The taxes are going to be rather high in Olympia Fields because there's no basis in terms of, there's no tax basis, really. They have no other revenue besides basically gorging homeowners for their taxes. There's no commercial businesses there. So then the homeowners get hit with all the tax burden for the schools, this, that, all that kind of stuff, municipalities, so on and so forth. So my point being is that I would look at that as the first thing. And then second thing I asked him was, I would look at the turnover. I would look at how many properties have sold that are 3,000 square feet, that are 4-bedroom, 2-bath, blah, blah, whatever the specifications are. Because this person is all excited because they're getting this house. They may get this house, I should say. They may get this house for a pretty sweet deal. The problem is this: in this particular area, properties don't move. And they don't move, and people don't qualify because of the taxes, right? On this particular property, when we checked, and I don't know if you're listening to me right now or not, but otherwise you should go back and listen to this particular recording since you asked the question. The taxes on this particular property, when I checked, was $23,900. $23,900. Your back-end value on the property is no more than I'm going to say 350, 380. That's an obscene amount of taxes on a property for that kind of value, and you're going to have a very tough time selling this particular property. If I was you, this is just me, if I was you, I would pass on this property. I would not bid on the property because it's an abnormally high house, abnormally big house. Your estimate that you have of $60,000 as far as the rehab, I think you're going to be short, especially with what you intend to do. You're going to be at least $90,000 in this particular property in terms of a rehab. So I would be very, very careful. Even if it comes up at auction as a good buy, I would pass. That's just me. So going back to the topic of, well, why did I say that you have to be careful of some suburbs? See, there are certain suburbs in Chicago that basically have a problem because the taxes are so high, and the suburbs don't necessarily, in those particular areas, don't necessarily have good schools. So they don't necessarily attract people that are the wealthier people, that are the more white collar people. There's more of a blue collar base over there. And more properties in those particular areas are being bought by investors, right? I mean, there are certain pockets in South suburbs that have 40, 45, almost 50% investor base of people. Now, it's great. People might say, oh my God, it's great because so many investors are jumping in. But guess what's happening? Because so many investors are jumping in, more and more tenants are moving to the area. More and more people who have housing choice voucher programs. Well, what does that do for the area? It does not necessarily improve the values of that particular area. If anything, it depreciates the areas, the value for those areas. Well, guess why? Because are tenants going to take care of the properties as well as the homeowner will? That'll never happen, right? A tenant will never take care of the property. And I'm making a general statement, mind you. I'm not saying you may be a tenant and you may be exceptionally clean in terms of how you take care of a property, but I'm just saying in general. In general, a tenant will not be the best steward of a property. So it's not going to be in its mint condition, and that's just how it is. So that's something that you have to keep in your mind whenever whenever you're investing in an area. And with Chicago, it's kind of unique, because there are pockets in Chicago where you have a great pocket, right? And this is generally not the case for most areas in America. But in Chicago, you may have a suburb which basically the numbers are great. And then you may have a suburb right next to it, which doesn't really bode that well, right? It's just how it is. And so you as an investor have to watch for those things. Now, if you're one of those people that says, hey man, I'm just going to buy cheap, crappy properties, I don't care as long as the cash flow is there, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it if that's what you choose to do. That's not what we teach. That's not what we do. Hence, if I'm going to basically buy a property in an area like Olympia Fields, if I'm going to buy a property today in an area like Dalton, I'm going to be careful, because I don't think that it's going to work out as well for you. Even Country Club Hills, similar sort of thing. You can have a single family ranch right here. The taxes are $5,000. The ranch right next to it, the taxes are $9,500. I mean, think about it. It's almost double, right? Which makes no sense. How that is fair, God knows. But somebody didn't appeal the taxes, and they're just obscene. And these towns, they don't care. The politicians could care less. They just want to stay in power. And it's not about a political show, but that's just how it works. So when you are basically investing, this is something that you need to think about. That is this a property? It may be a stunning property. It may be a beautiful property. But guess what? People are going to come there. Interest rates are high. They're going to make an offer on your property, and then your offer is going to fall through. I just saw this happen on a property. It's happened on this property 5 times. 5 times the offers have been canceled, and it's for a single reason. It's because the taxes on this particular property are $12,000, right? $12,000 on a property that this investor is trying to sell for $180,000. I mean, can you believe that? That is ridiculous, right? That makes no sense. For $180,000, so your taxes, you are paying more in your taxes every month than you're paying for that particular property in terms of your mortgage, even based on today's mortgage rates, right? So that's why it just doesn't make any sense that how high these taxes are. Hence, in some of these areas, you have to be really, really careful. So looking for advice on this. Someone I know did some work, construction work in Chicago without a permit. An inspector found out and issued a stop work order. The city of Chicago is now requiring the guy to work with an architectural consultant to drop the plans and apply for the permits, even though the work is done for the most part. The consultant's fees add up to $6,500. Is this common amount for the fee? I don't know. I mean, I don't know how big this house is, but that seems really, 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 really high for a. I mean, is this an architect or is this a consultant? I'm kind of architectural consultant. Okay, so if you want an architect, I can give you an architect from Mastery that does a lot of these. So here, write down the number. Chris. Okay, his name is Chris Badea, and his number is 847-323-9970. 847-323-9970. That's Chris Badea from Mastery. And for some reason, if Chris can't do it, I can certainly give you a couple more names and numbers of people that you may want to talk to, because $6,500 seems high for this. So I'm not sure if I really agree with that much amount. Commonly, it should be anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000. That's what is common. Does anyone have experience with this? Is there an alternative solution? The alternative solution is that if they issued you a ticket already on this particular property, stop work order, I would see if you can send an attorney to the court, somebody who has dealt with the building violations court department, and I would see if they can negotiate something. You just pay a fee and get this over with and behind you. We have gotten caught before, and there is an attorney that we have used before. I could give you his number, and he may be able to help you. You're going to probably have to explain to him what you're trying to do. Hey, what's the name of that attorney downtown that we use? Lori doesn't do anything. She just sits there and just won't answer my question right now. So I'm having a hard time finding this guy right now. Anyways, I have, oh, here it is. Okay. His name is Daniel Kaufman. Again, that's Daniel Kaufman. His number is 847-909-6026. 847-909-6026. He is somebody that can help you in terms of your problem, and he knows how to deal with these people. He's dealt with a lot of building violations, a lot of building issues. So call him, and he should be able to help you get this thing sorted out. And what were you doing? I was looking for the number. So, all right, guys, thanks a bunch, and we will talk to you on Wednesday. Oh, Friday.